Welcome to the Prophecy Club. We are going to continue our interview that was started yesterday with Steve Henderson. He's been studying Bible prophecy for over 25 years. He's been a pastor, evangelist, equipper, apologist, and obviously he knows quite a bit about Bible prophecy, and I'm very fascinated to hear his conclusion of Daniel chapter 8. Steve, welcome back to the Prophecy Club.
Well, thank you, Brother Stan. I'm really honored to be part of this program, to share the sure word of prophecy.
Okay, you just completed explaining Daniel chapter 8, but let's assume someone didn't hear the broadcast yesterday. So in like 3 minutes or less, or 5 minutes or less, very quickly, recap Daniel 8 and then tell us what you think it means.
According to Daniel, when we see that which is spoken of by Daniel tied in to the gospel going around the end of the earth, then the end will come. Daniel had this vision in Daniel 8 of a ram and a goat. According to the prophecy, the ram is standing at a certain river, the river Ulai, which is now the modern-day Karun, at the confluence of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Now, when Daniel sees this vision, he is in Shushan in the province of Edom, and he's placed at this river, so we do not have to guess at the geographical location. Right in between Iraq and Iran is where this ram stood. He had two horns. One horn was higher than the other, and the higher horn came up last, indicative that at the time of this trouble, this ram will begin to push. He's pushing three different directions. He's pushing south, west, and north. And all of the geographical locations, the chronological sequences, are all there for a purpose and a time. So we have understanding, as Gabriel came and gave the interpretation of the vision, Gabriel said the vision would refer to the time of the end. According to Daniel 8 and verse 17, he said, I'm going to let you see what is at the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be. So we do not have to guess at where Gabriel places his vision. He didn't place it back in 539 BC, but he placed it where it belonged at the end of time. What we find is an interpretation that Gabriel continues on to show us exactly what the ram is, who the goat is, when the ram begins to push there in between Iraq and Iran, across the surface of the whole earth, and he's coming from the air. There's no boots on the ground here. He's coming from the air, and a prophet did not see the animal coming on the ground. He came from the air, which I think is also significant. According to most people, this particular prophecy pointed back to a time in history and have left it there. But at the end, we're going to run back and forth in this book, and knowledge is going to increase. Now, I haven't told you who I thought the ram was last session. Neither did I tell you who I thought the goat was. Habakkuk was told to write a vision, make it plain upon the tablets, that those who read it will run with it. And I believe that at the end, we're going to see the very players, the geographical locations, and the specifics come alive before our very eyes to alert us to the fact that we are, in fact, going home. Let's go to the interpretation now that Gabriel gave concerning the Medes and Persians and the goat, which comes across the surface of the earth. In verse 20 of chapter 8, Gabriel clearly says, the ram which you saw having two horns are the kings of the Medes and the Persians. It was in the day of Daniel, when he was writing the book, that Cyrus the Great went underneath the walls of Babylon, and the Medes and Persians came down and succeeded what is known as modern-day Iraq today. And Cyrus the Great, who was mentioned by the prophet Isaiah, went and diverted the rivers of the Euphrates. The Medes and Persians conquered Babylon at the time Daniel had been writing his book. So Babylon was in the location of modern-day Iraq. So if you place the Medes and Persians where they were at, Medes went all the way up to the Caspian Sea. Persia went points east of the Euphrates and even included some of Afghanistan. But the Medes also went over to the east and encompassed part of the eastern part of Syria. But when this happened, they were very evidently succeeding the Babylonian kingdom, which is a modern-day Iraq. Now, according to the next verse, Gabriel then gives the interpretation of who the goat is. And in verse 21 it says, the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now it's important to notice a couple of things about this particular verse. in my understanding, it's very expedient for translators on this side of history to take a look and say that the male goat is a kingdom of Greece. But the Hebrew word is a word of Yavan. Pay close attention to this. According to, in that day, Yavan encompassed what would be known as Eastern Europe at this particular moment. It involved Kittim and Tarshish and some of the other areas in that area. And they were known as people from the West. So according to the testimony, the goat came across the surface of the whole earth from the west. If we had a map to take a look at where the Yavan was, which came out of Genesis 10 and migrated to what is referred to now as Eastern Europe, and the North Mediterranean Sea, the Anatolia, Kittim, modern Cyprus, and the Ionians, the Grecian area. They were about as far west as what they knew to be. Back in that day, they had no concept of anything farther west, as far as the United States, for example. But according to the angel Gabriel, this goat comes across the surface of the whole earth from the west. So if I were to show you a map, Yavan wasn't too far from the Euphrates River. In fact, it would encompass a lot of the Mediterranean Sea. It was just directly west of Israel. Now, another specific that we need to pay close attention to is the large horn that is between its eyes is the first king. Now, please take note. The word first in the Hebrew simply means first in time, place, position, or authority. The notable horn is a notable nation. So the first king is a number one nation. And it's very imperative to understand that. Now, according to the historical application I've heard so many put together in reference to this vision, everyone puts it back in Alexander the Great's day. But may I suggest to you that Alexander the Great did not meet all the specifics of the details of this prophecy. So if that's the case, then we need to go back to the drawing board and take a good look. Now, I want to take just a few moments to share what I mean by this. The large horn that's between this goat's eyes is the first king, or a powerful kingdom, a number one nation. Now, the people who have put this back in Alexander the Great's day do not recognize that Alexander the Great was not the first king of Greece. So there is a discrepancy there, an application error that I think we need to take a look at.
By the way, I'm back with you, but go ahead.
Alexander the Great was not the first king of Greece. He was the second. King Philip, his father, was the first king, and he was assassinated. And the great Macedonian conqueror liberated his country from foreign occupation and brought it into the abyss of a world power. And without the military and political efforts of Philip, Alexander would have never been as successful as he was. After all, it was Philip who created a powerful Macedonian army and turned Macedonia into a strong nation arm. So the first thing that's wrong about the historical application is Alexander the Great was not the first king of Greece. He was the second. And then as you go on to the rest of the specifics, and you apply those, impose, in my opinion, the historical application, which belongs to the end, you'll begin to understand some more things. For as for the broken horn, it says, in Daniel 8:22, their four stood up in its place. So when the great nation breaks, then four will go up into its place, or come up out of its place, that will go to the four winds of the earth. So when the great horn breaks, the whole world is affected by this. Now, according to the historical application again, many people exposit this as Alexander dying at the ripe old age of 32 years old, and then when he dies, he had four generals, or four successors. Well, I have been in history a lot, because if I'm going to teach something, I want to make sure that if I'm going to impose history on prophecy, I want to make sure that my history lines up. And as I began to dig deep into the historical history of Greece, I noted that Alexander had many more generals. When he died, a lot of the generals that were underneath him began to fight with one another to see who was going to be his successor, and disputed his empire after his death. Now, the main application is that his kingdom broke up into Cassander, Lysicamus, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. But what I recognize is really amazing to me is Antigonus the One-Eyed, a major general, was never mentioned in the Christian interpretation of this vision. But in the records, you find several different generals that were involved after he died, called the Wars of the Diadochi. There were 4 wars that were fought. And let me just mention some of the generals, for information's sake, that actually came out of Alexander's successors. You had Antigonus, you had Demetrius, Antigonus II, Ptolemy, Seleucus, Antiochus, Lysicamus, Antipater, Cassander, Perdiccas, Eumenes, and Craterus. Now, according to this historical record, there were 12 generals, and they were fighting against one another. There was no cohesiveness between the warmongers, and surely not 4 which can be singled out as notable or prominent.
We'll be right back after this message. In the Rob Skiba gift offer, his first DVD is Mythology, UFOs, and the Coming Great Deception. Topics are Sumerian, Egyptian, and Greek pantheons, the Coming Great Deception, UFOs and aliens, interdimensional portals, transhumanism, and the quest to be like gods, giants and hybrids. And in Babylon Rising, the topics are the signs in the heavens, Babylon in the last days, New World Order conspiracies, secret societies, and the occult's obsession with the numbers 322, tetrads or blood red moons in the eclipses in the days ahead, the feasts of God and how they relate to the last days, the tribulation survival plan, and 2045, the year man becomes immortal. Topics will be Genesis 6 Nephilim, hybrid humans, war with hybrids, hybrids among us, the injection of immortality. All 3 DVDs valued at $90, available for a gift of just $50 at prophecyclub.com. In Doug Hamp's new DVD, The Injection of the Beast, in the last days, it will be as in the days of Noah. Angels were mixing their seed with humanity, and it's happening again. That's demons and humans having sexual relations, masquerading as aliens, are actually creating Nephilim hybrids for the body of the Antichrist. Then in The Fall Feast and Prophecy, he tells the story of how Jesus fulfilled the first 4 feasts at his first coming and how he will fulfill the next 3 in return on some future Rosh Hashanah. The Day of Atonement pictures the opening of the books and the judgment of those dead and alive. The Feast of Tabernacles pictures us receiving our mansions. Both DVDs valued at $60 for a gift of just $40 or more in the Hamp gift offer. Remember, the Prophecy Club continues because of your prayers and gifts of support, not the distribution of DVDs. And now, back to the program.
Which can be singled out as notable or prominent. And if I had the maps set before me that I could set before you, you find out that eventually went into 5 different divisions, and then it went into, by the year 300, there were 3 large parts that it broke up into, which are now more or less coincided with Alexander's possessions in Europe, Egypt, and Asia. So by 240 BC, the Hellenistic world had divided into 3 divisions, and following his death and the Diadochi Wars, the Antigonid dynasty maintained control of the mainland Greece, the Seleucids governed the Eastern Empire, and the Ptolemies ruled ancient Egypt. So, again, the history does not line up with the prophecy. So when the Bible says that the kings of the Ram is the Medes and Persians, you have to put it where Daniel puts it, and you put the Medes and Persians at the end of time. I don't have to guess where that river is. It's a geographical location right there in between Iraq and Iran. I don't have to guess where Yavan is. That is very clearly identified as what is referred to now as Eastern Europe. People of the West, they were known as. There was no such thing as the United States of America back then. So the truth of the matter is, 539 BC to 1868 BC, where most people place this vision, was not the end. In 539 BC, the Medes and Persians conquered Babylon, which is the modern-day Iraq, and very clearly, Gabriel said, understand, this vision refers to the time of the end. Now, even in the as you go into the prophecy, which we're not going to get into here,
let me just jump in there because I have to say something. That in going through this, actually just before you begin explaining it there, I began to see something that I'd never seen before. And so let me just bring in there why I believe this vision was, and by the way, I've changed my opinion on this. For those of you that have Daniel verse by verse, you're about to say, well, that's not what you taught on the DVD. And, well, no, I reserve the right to change my opinion as I get additional information. This is not about me. This is about Jesus, and this is about finding the truth. This is not about building some ministry because I'm the greatest, okay? I'm just another vine dresser in the vineyard, right, brother?
Hallelujah.
Okay, so here's why what he's saying is correct about the timing. As in verse 17, it says the time of the end shall be the vision. Verse 19, it says the last end of the indignation. Now, in my research studies of the word indignation, almost every time the word indignation is used in the Bible, it is almost always talking about the day of the Lord, the last day, the day that the rapture takes place, the day the burning of the tares takes place, the day that Jesus goes and blows his glory and destroys all the sinners out of it. Okay. Then if we go down to verse 23, it says, a king of fierce countenance, understanding dark sentences. No question, that's the Antichrist. Absolutely. And then if you go on down to verse 25, it says, the prince of princes, that's the Antichrist, shall be broken without hand. How is the Antichrist destroyed? With the breath of his mouth. Then verse 26, it says, the evening and the morning. As I have been saying a long time, that the day of the Lord is one evening and morning, Isaiah 17:14. In the evening tide he is, and the morning he is not. So there is no question this vision takes place on the day of the Lord and associated with it.
Hallelujah.
Back to you.
Thank you, Brother Stan. And I believe that when we are able to receive it, when the book is ready to be unsealed, that means that there's going to be greater light that's going to come to the people of Yahweh so that we will be able to understand the time we live in and prepare ourselves for his coming. And the book would be sealed up until the time of the end. And so, it's not unlawful to make application to this and say, well, this is the way I believe, but when the truth comes and the scroll unrolls, then we're going to see more light illuminate out of the book of Daniel that will help us not only to be excited, but also to recognize we're facing some pretty amazing things in our near future. And that involves not only a war between the West and a great nation, but it also involves who I would believe at this particular moment in time involves Iraq, Iran, and even part of Syria. And as we look at the news, right now Netanyahu is over in the United Nations, and it was last week that Obama had made conciliatory movements toward the president of Iran for the first time in 30 years. And that has infuriated Israel because Israel has openly said that we are going to annihilate Israel and push them into the sea. And if they ever get a nuclear weapon, you know what their intent is. And Israel is very nervous at this particular moment, not only with what is going on in Syria, but, of course, Syria and Iran are two brothers of the same. And
here, let me just say, you've only got about another 6 minutes in this broadcast. Okay?
Another what?
6 minutes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Are we still taping?
Yes, we are. Go ahead.
Okay. So, the war between the ram and the goat, it's going to turn the world upside down. When the ram is defeated, when this goat comes across the surface of the whole earth and tears down this ram is left powerless. And then this big bully becomes even larger, but then the prophet says that he saw the great horn broken. Now, I don't know if I've actually told you who I think the great nation from across the surface of the whole earth from the west is, but I think it's clear that I only know of one nation in this world that's noted as a great or notable nation that is located in the West. And as we look at the historical setting and the things that have happened here in our last 20 years, one being the Iran-Iraq War. When I began to study this prophecy in 1989, it was shortly thereafter, after the Iran-Iraq War. And by the way, where they fought that war was right along that river where Daniel stood in vision 2,500 years ago. It was over that waterway that goes out into the Persian Gulf, which is the most powerful strategic river where all the oil goes in and out of the Middle East. Now, according to the prophet, at some point in time, this bully is going to push right there. And it's going to infuriate these powers from the West with a great nation leading the way. And I still haven't told you who I think that is. But as the scroll unrolls, I believe it becomes very, very clear to us. Now, in 80 to 88, Iran and Iraq fought a 8-year war. And it was in 1991, as I began to study these prophecies, I had singled out in my homework, I did my homework with where I thought these nations may be. I said that when I see Iran and Iraq in the news, I'm going to begin to start to pay attention. And so in 1991, sure enough, here is Saddam that goes down into Kuwait, right south of that river where Daniel stood in vision 2,500 years ago, and went down to try to seize that waterway again. That's why he went into Kuwait. And then all of a sudden, here are these powers from the West, this coalition from the West, gets together and says, no, this isn't going to happen. And so they come over to that particular section of Kuwait, and they push Saddam back in to Iraq.
Okay,
Remember,
let me jump in here. Let me throw a couple of ideas at you. Obviously, you're saying that this may be a future United States. I believe that we will be conquered by then. But I've got a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
Okay, I believe, and I think you'll agree, that Daniel is a foreshadowing of the end times, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, in Daniel chapter 2, we're talking about the statue.
Yes.
And it's talking about the 2 feet with 10 toes on it, meaning
yes.
a world government divided into 10 global regions. Then we also know that Daniel was in the lion's den. All of those visions all took place in the nation of Iraq.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay? That whole Mede-Persian area.
Right.
So I believe, that, and I've been saying for a long time, that I believe the Antichrist comes from either Syria or Iraq. So in that, this place, most of Daniel took place inside the nation of Iraq. I have to lean, if I had to choose between Syria and Iraq, I'd have to say probably Iraq. Mm-hmm. So I don't see how the United States could be the nation that the Antichrist comes from. As a matter of fact, I don't see any other scripture that says he would come from the West. To me, I think the West is probably talking about a future war between the Medes and the Persians. The only problem is the ram is the Medes and Persians. So that would have to leave us with Syria, because that's still the only nation west of the Medes and the Persians, or Iraq, Iran, that would attack them would either be Israel or Syria. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think the Antichrist is coming from Israel, so that'd have to be Syria.
Well, keep in mind that this is a Jewish book written by Jewish prophets and pertains to Jewish people. So anything, if it talks about the Medes and Persians, then there's something connected to that little piece of property called Israel. And so in what I see happening here, if you just turn on the news of CNN, you're going to find out that Iran is in the crosshairs of Israel and the United States. And at some point in time, according to my understanding, this goat from across the face of the whole earth from the west, with a great nation leading the way, is going to come over there to that place and is going to stomp down that ram and render it powerless. And when that happens, that great horn is going to break. And if I had time, just this morning, I turned on the TV and found out that the government has just been shut down in this country. And I believe that the breaking of the great horn is going to happen, and what will break it to its fullest extent is this war that's going to take place from the great nation. And I believe that the United States is that great nation, and I'm absolutely convinced that that focus of Daniel was on that great horn. And when this war ensues, then the ram will be broken down, but then the horn will break, the great horn will break, and it will go toward the four winds of heaven and affect the whole world. And if the United States did break, that would definitely affect the whole world.
Okay, then what nation do you think the Antichrist comes from?
In my estimation, and let's be serious about it, the Islamic adherents, 1.3 billion, are looking for the 12th Imam to show up right over there in Jerusalem. The Jews are looking for the Messiah. They don't believe that Jesus was, so they're looking for the Messiah. And guess where he's going to show up? Right over there in Jerusalem. In fact, as far as identifying where the Antichrist comes out of, I'm not at this moment prepared because I don't want to be considered. I don't want to speculate, but I will say this: that when this Antichrist shows up, I will tell you where he will show up at, and he will show up right over there in that holy spot, Jerusalem, because that is the focus of where it's all heading. Where Yahweh put his name, where he said, I want you, Solomon, to build this house. There is going to be one over there that sits saying, I'm the one. And at that time...
Absolutely. He will sit on the Ark of the Covenant. That is the abomination of desolation.
Yes.
He says, I am Christ, I am God. And you stop the animal sacrifice. That's when he sets up the abomination of desolation. So, yeah, we agree that the last 3.5 years of the tribulation, the Antichrist does rule and reign from Jerusalem.
Yes.
So,
as far
if you
as
put that together,
where he comes from, Stan, I have my ideas, but I'm not prepared to, over the radio especially, to speculate. I believe that when it happens, we'll know very, very clearly as the scroll unrolls. And so I'm not afraid to say I don't know. It's not that I don't know. I have my ideas, but I want to be quiet until I know for sure, okay?
Okay, 30 seconds to summarize.
Okay. Friends, we're facing the end of things. And I want to ask you, do you have a religion or do you have a relationship? And that is what God wants. Many people go to church and say, how you doing, brother? Hope to see you next week. But don't have a clue about what it is to have a relationship with Yeshua, the Messiah. Pray, watch and pray that you be counted worthy to escape these things and to stand before the Son of Man. If there were ever a time we need to be watching, it's right now, friends, because the glorious day that we've been all looking for, the prophets would have been looking for this day and would have been excited to be here. We're in the very heart of it, and Jesus is returning soon.
Okay, well, brothers and sisters, let me say thank you again. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your prayers, and thank you for your gifts of support. God bless. Now from the Prophecy Club, some exciting opportunities for you. In the Rob Skiba gift offer, his first DVD is Mythology, UFOs, and the Coming Great Deception. Topics are Sumerian, Egyptian, and Greek pantheons, the Coming Great Deception, UFOs and aliens, interdimensional portals, transhumanism, and the quest to be like gods, giants and hybrids. And in Babylon Rising, the topics are the signs in the heavens, Babylon in the last days, New World Order conspiracies, secret societies, and the occult's obsession with the numbers 322, tetrads or blood red moons in the eclipses in the days ahead, the feasts of God and how they relate to the last days, the tribulation survival plan, and 2045, the year man becomes immortal. Topics will be Genesis 6 Nephilim, hybrid humans, war with hybrids, hybrids among us, the injection of immortality. All 3 DVDs valued at $90, available for a gift of just $50 at prophecyclub.com. There are 30 scriptures in the Bible which say in the last days massive amounts of oil will be discovered in Israel, and we believe we've been given the directive to use this prophesied oil and gas to fund worldwide soul winning. If you have questions about our vision, call 877-OIL-ISRAEL or 877-645-4772.